King James Version says, "And the same day, when the evening was come, he said unto them, Let us pass over unto the other side. And when he had sent away the multitude, they took him even as he was in a ship. There were also with him other little ships. There arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat unto the ship so that it was now full. And he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow, and they awake him, and say unto him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? And he arose and rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, Peace, be still. The wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said unto them, Why are ye so fearful? How is it that ye have no faith? They feared exceedingly, and said one to another, What manner of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? I don't want to stop, but I just want to pause there. I'll pick back up in a little while. Today, by the grace of God and with the help of God, I want to tag this text, What storm is going to stop you? Amen. You all may be seated. Can we just try to answer that question this morning? What storm is going to stop you? Let me tell you that, did you know that you were going to encounter a storm? In life, you are going to encounter a storm. And let me get you a little secret about storms real quick, because I got a lot I want to cover this day. Your location determines your type of storm. Your location determines your type of storms. Your location determines where you are determines what kind of storm you're going to have in your life. The text this morning, Mark chapter 4, helps us to understand, to take confidence in the question, what storm is going to stop you? What I'm saying is you can succeed, have success, overcome the storm. Well, what does that look like, Pastor? How does that work? I'm so glad you asked. I got to rush to this thing this morning. Your success in the storm will include, first of all, an objective. All right. An objective is right here in the text. It says, verse 35, the same day when evening was come, he said to them, Let us pass over unto the other side. In life, the question you got to ask is, where are you going? He says, let's pass over to the other side. There should be a destination through your life. Whether it's the next week, whether it's the next month, whether it's the next 6 months, the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, you ought to have an objective for living your life. You ought to be going somewhere. There should be some destinations in your life. So the question I got to ask you is, where are you going? What do you want? Before the storm happens, before they encounter a storm, Jesus had already given them the objective to why and where they were moving to. He says, let's go over to the other side. There was a plan that he has in place. And can I tell you, life is too short and too precious to be living and not have a plan. If you are not careful, you'll go from being 20 to 30 and wonder what happened to all those years. I don't know what happened, because you were living life without a plan. You were moving with no destination in mind. That's why when you get 40, you recognize, if I knew back then what I know now, I would be a lot further off, because I would understand I've got to have some destinations in my life if I really want to go where I want to go, if I really want to make it through the storm, if I really want to make it so that the storm does not hinder me, but it helps me to get to where I'm going. I've got to have some destinations in my life. So the question here is, what do you want? What does life look like? They were on the western shore wanting to head to the eastern shore. If the storm is not going to stop you, if you're facing some stuff in your life, where are you headed? Because if you're not careful, you'll be in the midst of the storm wondering, why me versus how do I get there? You see, a storm is going to happen. The question is, where are you headed before the storm hits? Because if you don't know where you're going, you will allow the storm to drive you somewhere, and you wonder, how did I get here? Something happens in life and you just wonder, I don't even know how I arrived. I don't know how I ended up here. I don't even know how this happened, because you didn't have a destination in mind. You got to live each day with a purpose. What do you want to happen today? Thank you. I appreciate you, man. Work with me. That's what I'm talking about. What do you want to happen this week coming up? What do you want to happen this month? What change, what advancement, what upgrades do you want in life? I understand it ain't always stuff. Sometimes it's just where you are. I just want to get to the point where I'm reading my Bible every day. I just want to get to the point where I'm just praying every day. This month, I just want to read an extra devotional. This month, I just want to pay my tithe. This month, I just want to give somebody something that didn't have. This month, I just want to give somebody a hug that just need a hug. This month, I want to stop being negative and start speaking life into people. Where do you want to end up? Gotta ask the question, what storm is going to stop you? So the text helps us to understand that your success in the storm will include, first of all, an objective, but secondly, it will include an obstacle. All right. You see, here in the text, they're on the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee is over 600 feet below sea level. It's surrounded by the Mount Hermon, and which rises up to over 9,200 feet. It surrounds the sea, and what happens is a little wind from the mountains comes down through the Jordan Valley and then creates a violent and sudden storm out on the sea. They are on the sea, and verse 37 says, the wind arose, and a great storm of wind and waves beat into the ship so that it was now full. There is an obstacle that they are facing, even with Peter, James, and John, the fishermen. They're in a violent, destructive, scary storm, because the Sea of Galilee again was known for these storms. It was not abnormal for them to face storms, but this one was especially violent. This one was especially bad. The idea, I know it's hard for us to see, especially not having much water here in Dallas. It's difficult for us to see, but the idea, the word here, in some versions it says tempest. In the King James it says storm. It's where we get our English word systemic. It literally means to shake. It means earthquake. The idea is a glass of water. The sea is like a glass of water in the hands of a giant and being shaken. That's the way the sea was. It was as if the winds and the waves didn't just come against the ship. I remember being out on the cruise, and my wife encouraged me to come out on the edge with her. Now me, I was cool on the inside. I ain't got to be all out there. She out there trying to get to the edge of the boat and like this and take pictures. That wasn't really my cup of tea. I said, I'll take a picture from you over here. I ain't going way out there. But when I looked down, I saw the waves just hitting the boat it rocks up against the boat. It hits the boat, but it wasn't beating up against the boat. You see, when they are breaking over the boat, the idea was the waves are coming and the boat got in the way and it broke over. It splashed, it came down hard because the boat was in the middle of the wave, and they are now beginning to drown because it's beginning to sink. They are afraid of this earthquake out on the water, this wind that is blowing. The disciples were in a storm. Not just the 12, but all of them, because verse 36 says other little ships were with them. And so here the disciples were in a storm. Let me tell you about disciples, and I'm gonna move a little further real quick. The New Testament tells us categorizes disciples in 4 ways. If we're not careful, we'll think all disciples are created and operate equally. But there are 4 types where the New Testament describes disciples. One category of disciple is, first of all, those that are curious. Those that follow Jesus to see what he was like. Those that wanted to hang around because they were intrigued and fascinated by what he said and what he did. It was, first of all, the curious. But not only is there the category of the curious, but secondly, there's the category of the convinced. The convinced were those that were intellectually convinced that Jesus was the Son of God. They understood and accepted his divine power. They received his message, but they were not committed. So they had no relationship with God. They didn't benefit the kingdom, and there was no eternal life for them. The third category is those that were closet. There were those who were disciples that were closet believers. They were in the closet about believing. They weren't out publicly. They came. That's why they came to Jesus by night, because they were closet disciples. They were following him, but didn't want anybody to know. But then the last category is those that were committed privately and publicly. Those that were not ashamed, those that walked upright before everybody, professing and confessing their relationship and their love for Jesus. Well, Pastor, why did you go through that? Why did you tell me all that? Because it doesn't matter what category of disciple you or your neighbor may be in, you're still going to experience some storms. Doesn't matter if you go to church one time a year or you go to church every day, you're going to experience some storms. Every disciple is going to experience some storms. They were scared. They were scared and they cried out, Jesus, save us. Literally in the Greek, the idea is, Lord, I need you to do it right now. I need you to come right now. I need you to hurry up right now. There was a certain tone to their voice that says, I need you to do it right now. Jesus was asleep on the pillow, and they woke him and said, Master, carest not that we perish? You don't care that we are dying? Jesus was sleeping calmly in the midst of a storm. Now, every now and then I'll wake up when the thunder get too loud. I'll wake up if the rain is beating too loud, but Jesus is asleep in a boat on a pillow in the midst of a storm where the boat is being shaken on the sea and he's still asleep. He was wet. But Jesus slept calmly because he didn't perceive any danger. It was dark, but he stayed asleep because he didn't perceive any danger. He was shaken, but he didn't perceive any danger. He kept on doing what he was doing because what we go through does not determine what we do. Pastor Dean, say that one more time. All right, I will. What we go through does not determine what we do. So Jesus was going through a storm just like the rest of them. But because he was going through, that didn't determine what he did. Let me just pause for a second, put a comma right there, press the double parallel sign. Look, don't act a fool. Don't lose your mind because you're going through a storm. Just because you're going through a storm, it does not have the right to determine what you do. Just because you get fired don't mean you got to act a fool. Just because you get a divorce don't mean you got to act a fool. Just because somebody leaves doesn't mean you got to act a fool. Just because you get a bad report doesn't mean you got to act a fool. Just because the bank account is negative doesn't mean you got to act the fool. What we go through does not have the right to determine how we respond. Jesus keeps on sleeping. He's showing them how you can trust God and rest in God, even in a supersized storm. Can I just help somebody real quick? I'm finna move on to my third point, but let me just help you this. This storm has to be bigger than the last storm. Your next storm will be bigger than this storm. Don't think anything is strange because it's getting more severe. The tests get harder the higher the grade you're in. Don't expect it to be the same or lesser. Expect it to be more because you've already passed that test. You've already made it through that. So the next one has to be elevated. What storm is going to stop you? I'm finna rush on to my close now. Because I just want to encourage somebody this morning to know that the success in your storm will include, first of all, an objective. Where are you going? The success of your storm will include an obstacle, something that is in your way. But also the success of the storm will include an ordinance. An ordinance, a law, a decree, an order, a command. Okay. Some of y'all didn't follow me on that one, so let's go here. Daniel chapter 6. King Darius was convinced to create a decree that for 30 days nobody could pray to any other god, and if you were found praying to any god, you'd be thrown into the lion's den. They set king up and set Daniel up, and so sure enough they caught Daniel praying, and because the king had set a decree, had set an order in place, he had to put Daniel in the lion's den. He didn't want to put Daniel in the lion's den, but he had to because the law had been given. The law had been spoken because he liked Daniel. But because of the law, the decree that was put in place, everything had to come up under its authority. Y'all didn't catch it? All right, here we go. I know it's raining in your life. I know the wind is blowing. I know it's dark. I know it's scary. I know the boat seems to be sinking. I know that it is shaking. But in the midst of chaos, Jesus gets up out of his sleep, rebukes the wind, and says to the waves, to the sea, "Peace, be still." The text says the wind ceased and there was a great calm. Normally, a storm gradually dies down. But when Jesus spoke, when Jesus gave this decree, immediately it stopped. Y'all didn't catch it. Y'all didn't catch it. Okay, all right. I'm really trying to leave you. But before I leave, I want you to know that you can establish a decree in the midst of the storm. When you establish a law, everything has to come up under what you say and do what you say. Because all we have to do, the problem with the disciples that were on the boat with Jesus is they wanted to do something different than what he was doing. All they need to do was grab a pillow like him and lay down and get you some rest in the middle of the storm. All you've got to do is follow what the leader is doing. And when you follow what the leader is doing, you will be okay. Jesus didn't say, just watch me, but he says, do what I do. Walk like I walk, talk like I talk, do what I do. And so what he shows them he can do is when there is a problem, when there is a situation in his life, in our life that is too big for us to handle, we can engage the power of our God. You know what engage means, right? You can connect with, you can activate the power that our God has when there is a situation in your life that just seems to be too big. There is an ordinance that you can create about your storm. The problem is we've complained about our storms. We've been mad about our storms. We've cried about our storms, but we haven't spoken to our storms. We've said in this house, divorce is not out there. Have you made a decree that we gonna love, we gonna do right, we gonna obey God, we gonna put sin on the outside of this door? Have you set a decree in your house? Have you set up a law in your house? Have you said to yourself in the midst of your storm, I am healed by his stripes? Have you said that I am more than a conqueror? Have you said, I know that all things will work together for my good? Begin to decree, begin to declare, begin to set an order in the midst of your storm. Watch this. Jesus was on the boat. Jesus was in the storm, but until he spoke to the storm didn't know what to do. Excuse me, that felt real good to me right there. The storm is just waiting on me to open up my mouth. The storm is just waiting on me to tell it what to do. The storm is waiting to do what I say do. So as long as I don't say anything, the storm will keep on doing what it's doing. But as soon as I open my mouth, as soon as I begin to speak, as soon as I begin to declare, that is what it shall be. And too many of us have been mad, have been upset, have been frustrated with our storm versus speaking to the storm. The storm has to know what to do, and we're the only ones that can tell it what to do. We're the only ones that can get it in order. We're the only ones. Jesus speaks to the storm, and the storm gets some act right real quick. But can I tell you, not only did he speak to the storm, but he also spoke to the disciples. After he rebuked the storm, he rebuked them. It's in the text. I didn't make it up. He says unto them, he rose, rebuked the wind, and said unto the sea, peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said unto them, why are you so fearful? Why is it that you have no faith? Jesus asked and answers the question all in the same breath. He says, why are you fearful? Why is it that you have no faith? The reason you're fearful is because you have no faith. Some versions say fearful. Some versions say afraid. Some say timid. Some say the idea here in the Greek is that you're being a coward. Jesus says, why are you being a coward? Why are you being so scary? Here it is. This text is sandwiched in between an authority sandwich. Let me show you what I mean. It is Matthew chapter 1. If this same text is over in Matthew chapter 8, verse 23. It tells the same thing. It tells the same thing over in Luke. In Matthew, it helps us out because it gives us a better idea of what's happened in the context of what's going on. In Matthew chapter 8, verse 1, it shows that Jesus has authority over leprosy. In Matthew chapter 8, verse 5, it says Jesus has authority over paralysis. In Matthew chapter 8, verse 14, it shows Jesus has authority over sickness. In Matthew chapter 8, verse 18, it says Jesus has the authority to call disciples. In Matthew chapter 9, it talks about Jesus has authority over fasting. In Matthew chapter 9, verse 18, it shows Jesus has authority over life. And so our text in Matthew is in Matthew 8:23. I started in Matthew 8:1 and ended in Matthew 8:9-19. So in the middle of that is 8:23. So in the midst of all of that, Jesus showing them that he has authority over nature. He's been on a journey with them. He's took them to school real quick to show that he has authority over everything. So why is it that they are afraid? You've got to understand that there is power. Life and death is in the power of your tongue. And so what you are saying becomes your reality. And so Jesus says to the wind, peace and be still. And guess what? It got still. I dare you to begin to speak life over your life and see what God allows to happen in your life. If you begin to speak it, you'll begin to see it. And if you begin to see it, that becomes your reality. And so just by speaking a word, they are out of the storm and now in safety. I'm done. God bless you. Heaven smile upon you. But what storm is going to stop you? You've got to know that your success in the storm will include your objective. It will include your obstacle. It will also include an ordinance. You've got to begin to speak some stuff. You've got to begin to declare some stuff. You've got to begin to say some stuff. Stop crying yourself to sleep and start praying yourself to sleep. See yourself out of this. See yourself better. See yourself above. See yourself higher. See yourself as an overcomer and say what you see. Don't be afraid what people say about you. Don't be afraid what people think. Don't be afraid how people respond. See your way out of this thing and begin to say it. And when you begin to say stuff will happen. I did tell you, they looked at Jesus now and they were astonished. They looked at him and they were more afraid of him than the storm now because of what he was able to do. You've got to understand that you don't believe it. He's basically saying, after all of this, you should have known me and my power. You should have known what I've had the ability to do. Earlier I said to you that I was going to pause right there at verse 41. Y'all didn't forget that, did you? I didn't forget. I read verse 41 and it says, they were feared exceeding and said one to another, what manner of man is this? And even the wind and the sea obey him. I can give you 3 points. Can I throw you a pepper real quick? Every now and then I go get some chicken. Every now and then I got to get a pepper. Just a little extra. Throw a little something in it. It ain't a piece of meat, but a little something that helps the meal go a little bit better. You see, many of us, if we're not careful, we'll think that our life, our situation ends at the end of the chapter. But if you can, just peek over in chapter 5. Just peek over in chapter 5. Chapter 5, verse 1 says, and they came over unto the other side of the sea. God bless you. Heaven smile upon you. What storm is going to stop you? The success of your storm will include your objective. The success of your storm will include your obstacle. The success of your storm will include your ordinance, but it will also include your outcome. I know you thought it was over in chapter 4, verse 41. As a matter of fact, when I look at my Bible, it's a different heading up on chapter 5, verse 1. It seems as there has been a shift, but because I saw the word and, it ties together verse 41 with chapter 5, verse 1. It connects them two as one continual thought. And so what God is saying through his word is you keep on going and understanding the power of God. But in the midst of it all, you got to understand that there's going to be an outcome. What is the outcome? And they came over unto the other side of the sea. You've got to know that what God has given you, that God has the power to shield you and keep you safe. You've got to know that if God has performed miracle upon miracle for folk that wouldn't even come back to say thank you, that wouldn't even come back to show appreciation, how would he do it for you? You've got to know that even in the midst of the storm, if you drowned, that would mean an instant heaven for you. You've got not to be worried about what you're going through, but know that God will take care of you. You've got to know that it is in his word that he will take care of you. I'm not lying. Run back and research it for yourself. In Psalm number 107, verses 23 through verse 30, you'll see this story. Let me give you the summary because I got to get up out of here. It says that there were some folk that went out on the sea. That God sent them out there on the sea, but then some storms happened in their life, and they went up and then they went down, and water was coming all over, but God delivered them out of that storm. That's Psalm 107, 23 through 30. We see that was written way before this was written. They had that. They had read that. They understood that God had delivered before. So if God did it back then for somebody else, don't you know that the same God has the power to deliver you on today? Whatever it is that you're going through, you've got to know that God will take care of you. There is no reason for you to be afraid. There is no area in which his presence and his power cannot reach. You've got to understand that there will be no way that God will not show up for you. There is a plan that God has for your life, and he's not going to allow you to get out of here until you've completed that task. With that being said, can I ask you one question? What storm is going to stop you? If God ain't ready for me to get out of here, what's going to stop me? If God is not ready for me to have an exit, what storm is going to stop me? I ain't got to worry about what I am seeing. I don't have to worry about what I'm enduring. Don't have to worry about what I'm feeling, because God is going to take care of me. Does anybody in here this morning believe that? If you believe that, can I ask you again, what storm is going to stop you? What storm is going to make you crawl back in the bed and say, I can't face life today? What storm is going to make you say, I don't want to talk to anybody? What storm is going to make you say that this is going to lead to my demise? There is no storm. Let me tell you the answer. Because you shall come out of it. Don't worry about what you're going through. Can I tell you, it's just temporary. Can I tell you, don't worry about how long you're in the storm, because God will take care of you. God will. You'll see you through. God will make sure that you're all right even in the midst of the storm. Can I tell you one reason why he'll make sure you're all right? Because he's in the storm with you. I know you thought you were all alone. I know you thought you were by yourself. But right there, the same storm that they were in is the same storm that he was right there with you. I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what you're feeling. Don't know how many times you wanted to throw in the towel. But know this, God is right there in the midst of your storm. Every water that hits you hits him. Every shake that you feel, he also feels. Every move that you make, he's making the same move, because he will not leave you, nor will he forsake you, but he'll be right there every step of the way. So wave your hands and tell God thank you that this storm won't defeat me. The next storm won't defeat me, but I claim victory in Jesus, my Savior, forever. He bought me and sought me with his redeeming blood. He loved me, and I knew him, and all my love is to him. There's victory in Jesus beneath the cleansing flood. I've made up my mind that no matter what the storm may be, I shall come out victorious. I shall be a winner. I shall make it all right. What storm is going to destroy me? What storm is going to take me out? There's not a storm that will make me quit, but I'll just have to say, Father, I stretch my hand to thee. No other help I know. If thou withdraw thyself from me, oh, whether shall I go? I've made up my mind that the storm won't defeat me, so I'm walking in Jesus. The victory that he gives me day by day, I'm victorious, making it through each night, because I'm victorious. Don't smile in the midst of the storm, because I'm victorious. Don't worry about what I go through. I'm getting out of this, because God's going to make sure that I get out of this. I decree and declare that I am victorious. I decree and declare that God will see me through. I decree and declare that I'm healed. I decree and declare that my mind is stable. I decree and declare that I'm not going to be sick. I decree and declare declare where I see myself on tomorrow. Forget what I see right now. But I know my God will deliver me. I'm expecting God to allow my chapter 5, verse 1 to be my next day. So don't worry about the night. Joy comes in the morning. Don't you know that it'll be alright? Can you say yeah? Say yeah. Say yeah. Oh yes. God will make it alright. There's not a storm that's going to stop you. There's not a storm that's going to stop you. There's not a storm that's going to stop you.